It gave me advice and information from more experience. It helped me network with people and really kind of get out there. And it was definitely worth it. So
today's interview is going to be with the Bearded IT Dad, another YouTuber / content creator. We talk about how to best break into IT, like the paths of least resistance, and kind of give our opinions on what's important and what's not important and what you can kind of do to get into the field with the least amount of resistance. So yeah, it's definitely worth listening to, especially if you're thinking about making a career change and you're doing something like totally unrelated to IT. So yeah, check it out. Hey, my name's Josh Madakor. I'm a YouTuber and a cybersecurity professional. I've worked in IT since 2007 or so. I've worked in like kind of general sysadmin, then I went to cybersecurity, then I done some kind of software engineering type stuff, and then I kind of landed more on YouTube. I feel I get more fulfillment out of that. Yeah, I make a lot of content trying to help people to get into IT and cybersecurity, and I spend most of my time in Japan, like between Japan and Thailand. I'm in the States right now because I'm doing errands, but I'm usually living in Japan because the food is like so tasty there and it's cheap and everything. Doing that nomad lifestyle.
That's so awesome. No, me and my wife were literally just talking this week how we want to go over there and visit. So, but yeah, welcome back to the show, Josh. Thank you for, taking the time. And, for those listeners, for those of you that are watching this or listening, our goal today is to really just give you an outline of everything you need to get started with your career in the tech field. We're going to talk about everything you need, from the skills needed to land that first job to interview advice and much more. So diving right on in, Josh, when someone is thinking about starting a career in the IT field, it can really feel overwhelming. I know when I was looking to switch from being a bulldozer operator to a job in tech, I did not have a clue where to start. And there's a bunch of different paths within the tech industry. What is some of the most crucial first steps for someone who is just beginning their journey in the IT field?
If I were like starting over again, I would probably like just watch a few YouTube videos of other people who maybe worked in IT or something. And they talk about like what they do in their day to day to get kind of a sense of it. But in terms of like actually trying to break into the field and getting the necessary knowledge, when you really think about it, you don't need much more than what the hiring manager expects you to know, and definitely not more than the hiring manager really knows. If you do those like traditional routes, like you go to like maybe like a 4-year university or something, you'll learn you'll be exposed to a lot of stuff, but it's kind of superfluous because you really only need like this much to start working, and then when you start working, that's when you like really start getting good experience. I can talk more about this. It's going to get really long. Is that, do you want like a more in-depth?
No, that's perfect, because, one thing that I was debating when I wanted to make the switch was, did I need to go back to school? Did I need to go like get a degree? Because I was a college dropout, and I did my research, and I was, again, just like you suggested, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos of other people in the tech industry and giving advice. And I realized I didn't need like a 4-year traditional degree. And even more so now that I'm into the field for a while, I'm realizing kind of that traditional degree path, while it works, don't get me wrong, I don't want anyone who's dead set on getting a degree, go get it. But there's a lot cheaper and more efficient uses of your time to go get your start in the field, to get the knowledge you need.
I agree, 100%.
Again, kind of just diving into that, there's so much information out there. What skills and knowledge and areas are important in IT, especially for beginners? Is there like we said IT is kind of a broad term, but I feel like there's certain skills that really apply to no matter what career path you want to go into. If you're interested in cybersecurity, networking, or whatever, are there certain skill sets that really people should be focusing on?
I think if you were to go out and interview like 100 people working in help desk or something like this, there'd be a lot of overlap on things like knowing the basics of computing, that is like understanding the difference between like RAM and hard disk and CPU, like those basic things, and then understanding the basics of networking. And by basics, I mean you can like look at an IP address and you know if it's like public or private or automatically assigned private, and like those kind of like basic level of stuff. And then beyond those like basic computing and networking, you'll find that there's software platforms or certain tools that are pretty much used like all over the place. Like Active Directory for sure. You should like understand what that is and get your hands dirty with it a bit. And then for sure, like any ticketing system, because pretty much everywhere uses ticketing systems, whether or not it's like cybersecurity or like software engineering, even basic things. And then there's other stuff too, like for sure, like VPNs, like all those like main toolkit that all corporate, like, like big companies have, like all that basic stuff is stuff that you should kind of like touch on. You don't have to learn it in super depth, but just be able to like understand it and talk about it at least somewhat like intelligently.
No, absolutely. When I started applying for my first job, one requirement I kept on seeing it over and over again was familiarity or able to do like some of the basic stuff in Active Directory. And I had no clue what Active Directory was. And like, I was like really intimidated by it, to be honest with you. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to reset a password in Active Directory? And, for those of you who do know, like that's one of the simplest tasks you can do almost. But, just not knowing. So again, I went out online and kind of started doing my research and tried to like start figuring out what the different things were and how everything worked together. So, one thing people may wonder about is, we talked that, okay, the big education path, the college path isn't necessarily the needed path. There's a big debate between traditional learning and self-learning and going through online platforms. And I know you're involved with CourseCareers, which is an awesome organization which focuses on helping people start their careers in tech. Can you share your thoughts on how beginners can effectively learn and develop their skills while using resources like CourseCareers?
Yeah. So I want to say like alternative education is like on the come up because it's just more efficient. And people are kind of starting to figure that out with like the internet and, everything's kind of decentralized. Alternative education is like not good, right? There's some that are not good. And there's some traditional education that's not good either. I just want to like get that out of the way. But the whole thing with like CourseCareers is, and my own courses, the whole goal that people are trying to do is they're just trying to like break into a field and get a job. And you don't need to do all of this like other extra stuff that takes forever and like costs a lot of money because we have like a finite lifespan, right? I have like 2,000 weeks left to live essentially if you like convert that into years. So like you don't want to you don't want to spend more time and more money than you have to. And what CourseCareers is doing, and then what I try to do is I don't put extra stuff. I put like what people need to learn to get hired. For sure, it's going to be like, nice to know extra stuff, but you don't need to spend like too much time and too much money learning stuff that you don't actually need to get a job. So super laser focus on the things that are important, like, all those like resume, portfolio, and like stuff that helps you convey passion and convey like ability to do job, like laser focus in on those things and then just like start job hunting. That's kind of
I was going to say, are you able to kind of go into, you said, resume and, cover letter and stuff like that, but are you able to kind of go into a little bit more details? Like what can someone expect with like that style program?
Yeah, like beyond resume and like the stuff I talked about.
I think everyone has a general understanding, like when you go the formal education route, going for a degree, everyone knows what to expect with that. But for someone who's like, well, maybe I do want to try out this alternative path, it sounds like it's a lot less money. It sounds like I get the same results. What can they actually expect to kind of learn, especially with your course per se? What can someone who's signing up expect to learn in that?
Okay, the way I think about like getting jobs and like preparing to change careers like a bit different. So I'll explain a bit. When you're trying to like break into IT or whatever the case is, you just have to like get an interview and then you have to pass an interview. So all the stuff you're preparing for, it's kind of for those two things. And to get an interview, it's kind of easy because all you have to do is like have a really nice resume, if that makes sense. That will match keywords and that doesn't get filtered out by the applicant tracking system. So after you get the interview, you have to like perform inside of the interview and like, answer the questions well, articulate yourself, all those like soft skills. So when you go through CourseCareers, we kind of focus on those two things, like getting in the interview and then passing the interview. So to get an interview, have like a lot of labs and a lot of hands-on stuff. That's like everything that you do in CourseCareers, you can kind of expect to see it when you get hired. Like if you watch some of the interviews that I do with graduates who have gotten jobs, they're like, yeah, everything that's in the course, I ended up doing at work. And like, that's on purpose. Because the stuff I put in the course is stuff that like pretty much everywhere is going to have some form of it, especially like entry-level IT and help desk. And then when you actually get in the interview, like your resume and like all your credentials like don't matter anymore. It just depends on like your performance, like how well you articulate yourself. And I find that the more you actually like do something, like the more times you like implement Active Directory or set up a ticketing system, if you do like 20 times, it becomes really easy for you to like talk about it in the interview. And like every time you set something up, you gain like more knowledge about it and more like understanding of the nuance of that platform, like whatever it is you're working with. So all the stuff we put in the labs, I kind of recommend people to do it more than once so they can build their intuition on it. And then when they get the interview, it's just like really easy to talk about because they've like done it so many times. Yeah, that's like CourseCareers, I guess.
No, that's super helpful. And one thing you mentioned that I think is like one of the most underrated things, like skills wise, is soft skills. Like every job I've landed, I know for a fact because the manager actually came back and told me. It was just weird. I've had 3 different jobs in the tech field, and every time the manager came back and told me, it said there was way more qualified people than you that applied for this job. But I liked, the reason we hired you is because I could tell that you're going to be a great fit with the team, communicated well. If you didn't know how something worked, you didn't try to like BS your way through it. You thought clearly and talked your way through it. And we really liked you for that. And, I don't know necessarily if that was a compliment, that there's more, technical people than me applying, but it seemed to work because all those jobs I had for, a decent amount of time and was promoted up within each position. So I think soft skills are super important. And again, often overlooked. In your experience, how important is some like soft skills and, for someone working in IT?
Yeah, it's really important, especially those like entry level position, because you're just like dealing with other people and like you have a team usually that you have to work with. If you can show empathy and humility and like honesty, like you're kind of saying like if you don't know something, you should say it, and then show some kind of level of flexibility and try to convey like you're able to take criticism well. If you're just like generally easy to work with and kind, that goes like a really long way. And as someone who hires people, it's kind of rare. I have like staff for like my YouTube, and I even have like technical positions, and I don't like hire people like 100% based on their skill set. I usually hire the person, and then I work with them to get them to like train them up for whatever I want them to do. So I do this too. It's like really important.
And yeah, I've kind of come full circle in this, where I realized this early on in my career. And I think I can attribute that to my success. Within the first 3 years of being in the field, I went from help desk to director of network operations. And I know a big part of that was soft skills. And for those people that are just starting out, do you have any tips on how to like, maybe if your soft skills, like you haven't been in a customer service role, do you have any tips on how you can develop and improve these skills?
I'm not a good person to ask. Soft skill is like, other than just like being, because
I fooled me.
Well, I'm kind of lucky because I have like innately kind of high empathy, and like I kind of have those like innate soft skill, and I don't know how to develop it other than like just being aware of it and like seeking feedback in this type of thing and just being cognizant about it. Like ask yourself, like if my boss tells me like I'm doing a bad job, like how am I going to react? Because you can like be bad at soft skills, but if you're cognizant and you're careful, you can kind of come off as having good soft skills and you can develop them. So just, I guess my advice would be like, just try to think about it and observe the people around you and try to like get feedback from your peers and like your manager and stuff. That's like, I don't know. Do you have anything to add or any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I agree. When I first entered the working force, I was in customer service. I fast food. I did those kind of jobs. Then I went on to manufacturing, bulldozer operator. You don't need customer service skills when you're driving a bulldozer. Let's just be honest. So when I was making the conscious decision to switch back to tech, I knew that's one thing I needed to brush back up on. So I started going to like networking events. I went to like websites like meetup.com. This was all pre-pandemic, so there's a lot more of them. I feel that all of them have come back, but a lot of times I go to like meetup.com or looked on LinkedIn, and there'd be like events in my area, like in-person events where they do like IT and brews. They'd a couple people would meet up at the bar and shoot stories about, the tech industry, or there'd be like some networking event where you go and meet other like-minded people. So I went there, and instead of just being a wallflower listening, I would force myself to talk to people and get outside that comfort zone. And for me, it wasn't very difficult. I'm kind of much like you. I kind of naturally try to do that. I made a conscious effort on trying to engage more into those situations. So when it was time for an interview, I was better prepared.
You saying that kind of reminded me of something that maybe it might be useful for people listening. So I'm kind of like awkward and I'm introverted, and I have a hard time just like talking to people. And you might feel like, if you're listening to this, you might feel you're introverted and weird and stuff, but as long as you're like nice to people and show empathy and do your work, all that like being like weird and introverted is like completely forgiven. And I've never had like a hard time with it. And I've had people like ask me to come back to work just because like I work well and I'm nice to people. So you don't have to worry if you're weird or like too shy or whatever. Just be nice and do your best, and I think it will be like okay, right?
I agree completely. And I'll let everyone in on a secret. Most of us in tech are all introverted and weird in our own way. I think it's like almost a requirement. But one thing I've found is almost everyone I've talked to in this industry is so nice and willing to help, or, listen or give you advice. And I learned that early on is, forced myself to talk to those people, did several things for my job career. It gave me advice and information from more experience. It helped me network with people and really kind of get out there. And it was definitely worth it. So when I first started applying for tech jobs in the industry, like, again, it was extremely stressful, and just making that career change, kind of jumping off into the unknown. From your experience, what are some key pieces of advice you would give someone who is applying for that first IT job? And are there any particular strategies or tips that you can give them to help really make their application stand out?
Yeah. So the first thing, CourseCareers can help with this, but you want to make sure your resume is really like simple and readable by the ATS. Like if you have like columns on it or something, it's going to get thrown out by at least more than if you didn't have columns. So it has to be like really like a good resume, I guess. Normally I'd like show one on the screen, because if you have like a good resume and a bad resume, like you might have to apply like 300 times before you get an interview with a bad resume versus like 30 or 50 times with a good resume. So that's like one thing. And then I don't like to apply to stuff that's like super saturated with like ton of other people applying to it. So if you can do like little strategies like searching different keywords other than just like help desk or something, maybe you'll search something like knock or third shift or something like these kind of obscure keywords. It might bring out jobs that the masses are not applying for. So if you apply to a job where there's like 10 other people applying to it, it's better than if there's like 100 other people, something like this.
It's a good thing. I never thought about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And then also like kind of applying outside of the metro areas. If you're like able to do that, for example, you get a job in like Wyoming or something like this, and you just like suffer for 6 months and then move back to your metro area. There's like less tryhards in Wyoming and like less talent there, like tech talent. No offense to Wyoming, but it's going to be easier to get jobs in those areas if you're really trying to go hard and get a job fast. But yeah, just like a high quality resume, searching for jobs that like tons of other people aren't applying to, and then consider like outside of your geographic region.
Yeah. And that's interesting. You mentioned like applying outside the metropolitan area. So when I first started in tech, I actually did the exact opposite. I lived in a small town, and it literally felt like at one point I thought the only way to get into tech industry was if someone died. That was like the only time like a tech position opened up. So yeah. I actually ended up moving into a more populated area, like 3 hours away, lived there for 2-3 years, and then end up moving back after I got that initial experience. So that's interesting. Yeah. Definitely, I know it varies just depending on where you're at geographically.
Yeah. And I agree with this. For example, if you live in like Walla Walla, Washington, I'm not saying to like just stay there, like wait for a job to open up, because it won't, right? After like 3 years. When I say this, I'm thinking like I live in Seattle. This is, you don't have to do this. No one has to do this, but it's just like something I think about. Like if I'm living in Seattle, and then instead of applying to like 100 jobs like in Seattle, maybe I apply to like 100 jobs like scattered around the states in like kind of rural areas, because like 100 applications to like rural areas, it's going to yield more interviews than like 100 applications like in Seattle, when like one job has like 70 people or more applying to it. And I've done that. Like I've moved to Japan to get a security clearance because I wanted to like work a certain job, and I've moved to Hawaii. When I broke into cybersecurity, I actually like did that in Hawaii. because it's just like it was easier to get jobs there because there's like less people. So you don't have to do that, but if you're like a crazy person like I am, it's like that's an option that you could do.
That's really cool. And, what are some key pieces of advice, you have for someone who is preparing for that job interview? We talked about, applying for the jobs. What about when you go to the actual interview? Is there any specific things that they should focus on or common pitfalls they should avoid?
Yeah, so pretty much, especially for entry level IT, there will be like a lot of soft questions and situation based questions like tell me about a time when you did this, or like what would you do if this happened. And humans are really bad at entropy in the sense that like they can't come up with like new questions. So if you like prep yourself, whether or not you use Google or ChatGPT, like maybe 50 situational or soft questions, and just practice articulating those a lot, and that will be kind of like your foundation. And then when like a specific job asks you for an interview, like I would personally dump that job description into ChatGPT and ask GPT like, okay, give me like 20 sample interview questions and answers based on this job, and then it would give me those. And probably at least some of those are going to come out in the interview, along with for sure some of the situational like soft questions. And that's just how I would do it. Just make sure you articulate answers, like say it out loud to yourself, so it gets in your muscle memory. And I promise like interviewing is going to be way easier when you're actually like in the hot seat, like in front of like the panel or whatever. It's going to be way easier to like answer the questions if you prepare like that.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I did. It's actually, I came up with some like flashcards of ideas, like of questions I thought I might be asked, when I go into the interview, and I'd sit in the car like before the interview and like kind of go through those answers. But, one thing that I always did was like, I knew they're going to probably ask me questions I didn't know about, especially like technical interviews when I was first starting out. They'd ask me this question, like, what would you do? And I'd be like, I don't know what I would do, but let me tell you how I'd figure that out and work through that problem. And I would start taking them through my methodology of, well, first I'm going to go check Google or check a knowledge base, depending on the job I was applying for, and walk them through that. And now that I'm a hiring manager, I do that to my interviewees. Is I'll ask them a super open-ended question, and I typically get two kind of responses. I'll either get one person that gets so hung up because I didn't give them enough details on purpose, they're just drilling me for all these questions, and I'm like, no, just answer the question. And, it's like, say you come in and a user calls you and they have a blue screen of death. How do you solve it? And then some people would be like, oh, is it an error code? Is it this and that? I'm like, no, just walk me through their troubleshooting, like the basic troubleshooting, and then be like, okay, well, say you figured out the problem, but you don't know how to fix it. How do you figure that out? And all honestly, the answer I'm looking for is I want to hear that they're going to try themselves, like go to Google, look on tech forums and stuff like that, instead of just kind of throwing up their hands. I want to see that they're a self-starter. And do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, you can always say something better than I don't know, or like I've never done that. You can always come up with like some kind of answer that's better than that. So what you described is like really good.
Absolutely. Now, as we start to land the plane here, really quick before I ask you the next question, if people want to connect with you, find you, check out CourseCareers, where do you recommend them going?
You can probably just Google like Josh Madakor, or that's my YouTube name. Or you can Google like, well, yeah, just Josh Madakor, I guess. There's a bunch of stuff.
You can put it apparently into ChatGPT. ChatGPT has some really nice things to say about you.
Oh, really? Did you ask it?
I did actually the other day, just out of curiosity. I just prompted it like, do you know who Josh Madakor is? And it like wrote like 3 paragraphs about you, and it was very nice. So
that's crazy. I'm trying to do that. That's so funny.
But yeah, absolutely. You're definitely very accessible.
Yeah, I try to be. I try to answer like comments and stuff like this. Yeah, you can leave comments. I'll do my best to answer them, but there's like, I cannot promise.
No, absolutely. And we'll definitely link up to him down below. But if you could only give one piece of advice to someone who's looking to start in their career in the field, what would that one piece of advice be?
Gosh, just do something. Because this is a weird thing to say, but I found like the more that I do, the more I'm able to do, if that makes sense. So,
absolutely.
For example, even if you're like floundering or you don't know what the heck is going on, if you do like 3 things, you'll notice like one of them probably yielded more results than the other 2. So you just like stick with that, and then you do the next bunch of things, and then you just keep like doing stuff. Of course, this interview, we're trying to like help people like pinpoint and like laser focus on what they should be doing. But you should like take some kind of action, because if you don't do anything, like for sure nothing gonna happen. But if you do a lot of something, like stuff will happen, and you don't know what those things will be, but probably something good is going to come out of it. So just like do something and try to be consistent with it.
That's such great advice. And again, thank you for taking the time to come on the channel and just share your wonderful wisdom with everyone.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you want to check out the last time we had Josh on the channel and gave us such great advice, definitely go check out this video linked up here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And until next time, keep learning.